Almost 1,000 kilometres from Darwin, Borroloola is this month's circuit stop for the Northern Territory's Chief Judge. And just like most of the 32 communities on the remote circuit, this one doesn't have a dedicated courtroom. So, fresh off the flight, the judge and court staff start building one. Outside, defence lawyers call out to their clients, who they've likely never met before. Defendants and witnesses have been waiting outside all morning. Court was supposed to begin at 9:30, but the plane carrying the court didn't land until 10:05.
The very first thing is trying to get paperwork, because we don't have the paperwork for the new court matters until we get here. So I'll have a vague idea of how many new matters are going to be on the list because I've seen the list, but I won't necessarily know what the charges pertain to.
It's chaos, but the organised and important kind.
Courts and the laws of the Northern Territory are for everybody. They're not just for the people who live in the major centres. So we need to show that the law is there for their use and that they can see that justice is being done in their own community. Someone shouldn't have to travel thousands of kilometres in order to appear as a witness in their own case or in order to be tried in relation to something that they've been charged with. So do you think you'll be around then?
At 11:20, the first of the day's 83 matters is called on, and immediately the serious funding issues facing justice in the bush become more obvious than they were before.
Your Honour, this is a matter where Nanja has a conflict. The matter has been referred to the Legal Aid Commission, and the Legal Aid Commission have refused aid. Nanja needs to formally withdraw from the record.
Is that because we're in Borroloola?
Yes.
Okay.
Additionally,
while most defendants in remote communities like Borroloola are represented by the North Australia Aboriginal Justice Agency, if Nanja is already representing one side of a dispute, they can't represent the other, forcing the judge to tell defendant after defendant,
there's no legal service for you. So it's a bit of a stalemate in relation to what's going to happen with your charges.
In town, people who can't be represented by Nanja would be referred to legal aid, but here in Borroloola, where legal aid doesn't have an office, they're refusing to take on new matters. They say they don't have the funding to keep sending people out to remote communities. It means that some people who are facing serious charges are being left to either represent themselves or travel to Darwin or Katherine to access the justice system.
Not all people in Borroloola has a job. You know, most of my family are on Centrelink payment, and that's not going to keep them going, you know, if they're going to be in Katherine or Darwin for a week for court. So I think it's not fair, you know. Legal aid should have been still coming out to bush courts.
At the moment, legal aid lawyers are still attending circuits to finalise the matters they had before suspending bush services. And the Northern Territory's Attorney General, after his own visit to bush court, says he's requested urgent funding to ensure legal aid returns to the remote circuit.
I might be able to ask them some questions, but really, they really need a lawyer to give them advice.
One of the lawyers in town this week is Nanja solicitor Bryce Wilson, an Indigenous Wiradjuri man on his first bush court trip.
Just to really fly into this Aboriginal community that has their own laws, their own customs, and their own way of dealing with issues, to really just impose, you know, this colonial law in this colonial project, and it's been a really tough thing for me personally to do that.
An Aboriginal lawyer representing Aboriginal clients, he says, breaks down the first barriers between his clients and the fly-in, fly-out justice system.
If I can't, in a professional sense, remove them or distance them from the criminal law system, then what I can really do is hold their hand through the process.
In most communities and regularly in major centres, Aboriginal interpreters are an essential part of the justice system. In Borroloola, most of Naja's clients speak and understand English, but court speak is another layer of complexity.
It doesn't necessarily mean that people still don't need a pretty significant explanation of the court process and what's going on, particularly as a lot of people here have really strong connections to culture, and so they may have a legal understanding of a system that's quite different to the Western system that's coming out here. It might be that at the time the charges were laid that there was an issue that required police intervention, but a lot of families here will have their own mechanisms for effectively conferencing and reconciliation, I suppose. And so that by the time a matter gets to court, it might be 6 months later, and everyone might be of the view that the matter has effectively been resolved. And you have to explain that that's not the way that it's viewed in relation to the court system.
In communities like Borroloola, where the court sits once every 2 months, judges could be dealing with more than 80 matters in a day. And since circuit courts were suspended during the COVID-19 pandemic, files have been building and building, forcing the court to now play catch-up when it flies in.
We appear to be managing that, and I would hope by the end of this year we would have gone through most of those matters.
In communities, remoteness can make every aspect of justice just a little tougher.
It is distressing to the court that we cannot, and it seems to encapsulate so many of the difficulties about providing justice services in the Northern Territory.
The hands of judges and lawyers at times tied by distance and a lack of services.
Here in Borroloola, there's no men's behaviour change program, which would be really useful to deal with the high levels of domestic violence. In some communities, there's no alcohol and drug counselling, and that's also a really useful tool.
A person might not get bail in community because they can't be subject to monitoring, either because their community doesn't have electronic monitoring, or it might be that they reside at an outstation that doesn't have phone reception.
Hard-working fly-in, fly-out teams doing what they can to ensure justice is done in the bush as it is in the city.
We need well-resourced interpreter services. We need well-resourced prosecution services so that they've got enough time to deal with all of the matters that happen in a busy bush court. We need well-resourced legal aid agencies, at least 2, to manage conflict situations when a lawyer can't continue to act for somebody. Without all of those things, bush court's not able to operate.
In Borroloola, Melissa McKay, ABC News.